Good evening, my non-existent viewers. This video is gonna be a little unconventional, for my channel, in the sense where it's not a movie review, it's not a gaming review, it's not me doing, any sort of, random, unspecified nonsense. This is an idea for a video I've had for a while now, and it's a video that I've been seriously putting off, like other videos I've been planning to make, and my biggest apologies. I'm filming this video, it's 6:07 right now. I'm filming this video on May 30th, and May 30th has always been a very, special day to me. It's the feast day of Saint Joan of Arc, one of my favorite historical figures. I already made a video talking about, because today marks 593 years since she was burned at the stake, and, I grew up Catholic, and I've always loved history, ever since I was a kid, growing up, going to Sunday school and church and whatnot. She's been one of my favorite historical figures for years. And I already made a video discussing, Joan of Arc on her feast day 3 years ago, so if you want to check that out, go ahead and do so. But today, May 30th, is even more special, because one, it's Finding Nemo's 21st anniversary, and I'm wearing my Utica Zoo hat, because today marks an entire year since I started my internship at the Utica Zoo last summer. That internship broke my YouTube hiatus. I took a hiatus from YouTube because the internship I was supposed to have last year in Oregon fell through, and I took a 2.5 month break from making YouTube videos, and I reviewed Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, right after the end of my first week interning at the Utica Zoo. And yeah, I've been back making YouTube videos ever since. And I wanted to make this video talking about Sesame Street in particular, because during my internship at the Utica Zoo, they had I lived at the local community college, in Utica, MVCC, and I was living with other interns and local college students that summer, during my program, and they had a dining hall there, and one thing I loved to do was bring my laptop to the dining hall in the evenings and on my days off, eat some food, and I would watch episodes of Sesame Street. I've been watching a lot. This is gonna sound very strange because I turned 26 this October. Me being in my mid-20s, I've been watching a show targeted for preschoolers, but I've been watching quite a bit of Sesame Street within the past year and a half. And back in February, when I saw Elmo's whole post on X about Elmo's just checking in, how is everyone doing? And that entire thread was just Elmo, I'm not okay. So many, almost got 200 million views, and so many people, including celebrities, even Rachel Zegler of all people. I mean, she's feeling sad. I'm assuming it's because she's realizing, from her mistakes after the whole Snow White fiasco, but I digress. Yeah, so many people were just replying to Sesame, Elmo's whole post on X about how people were just not doing okay. The whole, emotional well-being, and, Elmo made a whole follow-up tweet addressing that. And, this is really nothing new for the show, because, even though Sesame Street is, targeted for preschoolers, they've been kicking it since, 1969 on PBS. They have never been afraid to address difficult subjects. As well as, again, I think people of all ages can at least enjoy something from Sesame Street. With super iconic characters like Elmo, Cookie Monster is my favorite, Big Bird, Abby Cadabby, Ernie and Bert, Oscar the Grouch, the Count, and the memes! So many memes have come out of Sesame Street. Who could possibly forget the Count censored, or the never-ending supply of, Ernie and Bert memes? I have so many memes of Sesame Street stashed on my laptop. Some of them are super dark, and the very quotable lines and the savage moments, the unexpectedly funny bits, Elmo's beef with Zoe's pet rock named Rocco, or him going overseas to Australia, and they hold the 2-minute sign. He's Elmo came this far and he gets 2 minutes. And I've been wanting to make this video just sort of talking about the show, because I really think I've learned a lot about myself, because I said, Sesame Street is obviously, it's not the only kids show that's ever addressed difficult subjects, but it was back in the 80s when Will Lee, the actor for Mr. Hooper, passed away. instead of recasting the character like other shows usually do, like the Sesame Street writers actually wrote Mr. Hooper's death into the show, and Big Bird, being the personification of like a 6.5-year-old child, doesn't really understand like how death works out. Death is final, and it's a very difficult concept for kids to grasp, but the show handled it with excellent care. And that kind of paved the way for other kids shows over the decades to address like difficult subjects for their young viewers. Sesame Street has tackled a lot of subjects, like, difficult subjects over the years. Like back in 2020, they addressed the COVID-19 pandemic, to kids, as well as the Black Lives Matter like protests. And they've also, quite a few times over the years, they've addressed like racism and sexism, and like, they also have addressed adoption for kids, HIV for kids. They've addressed, the challenges come with being in a military family for kids. They've addressed natural disasters. They've addressed the foster care system, and even drug abuse in one episode. And they addressed incarcerated parents, and they even addressed houselessness, because Lily is the first houseless. They sort of like made her out to be like the first houseless character on Sesame Street, which to me is kind of fun. And I know I'm not the first person to point this out, because Oscar the Grouch has been living in a trash can for like over 50 years. I feel like there's 3 episodes that have really like stuck with me. They also have back in like 2016 or 17, like sometime shortly before like Danny, Shane, and I graduated from high school, they introduced an autistic character named Julia. And that was like I remember people like being super happy over that back in 2016 and 17. Elmo and Abby introduce Julia to Big Bird, and they explain to her that, Julia just does things a little differently, and that, Julia sort of way the whole episode is them playing together, and like Big Bird learns about her super sensitive hearing and all these other challenges that she has. But in my opinion, at least, that whole episode, with the way they address autism to kids, is handled very well. Like, it's very nuanced, and it's not like overly reliant on like stereotypes surrounding autistic people. Like, I remember watching iCarly like when I was a kid, in that one episode with Mandy, that super obsessive fan of like Carly and Sam. Yeah, that whole episode is kind of like was low-key making fun of her for being on the spectrum. So it's really nice that like all these years later, that Sesame Street took the initiative to like introduce an autistic character that was, a lot more like, that wasn't as like mocking of people in that respective community. And also, Sesame Street did a whole episode addressing divorce, because Abby Cadabby has divorced parents. Back in 2012, they made an episode. She explains to Elmo and Rosita that like her parents aren't together anymore, and that they live in 2 different houses. And this is the thing that really, like, Abby starts, like, she's, in that episode, like, she's with Gordon, and, like, she's talking about how sad she is they left, and, like, that, like, or that her parents divorced, and, like, she's saying that she feels like she's to blame for it because of times that she turned things into pumpkins by accident. And Gordon reassures her, she's like, Abby, listen, like, a divorce happens because of issues between the grown-ups. It is never the child's fault. Which, with Julia and the divorce episode, as someone with, mental challenges, I've needed accommodations for, like, my PDD, NOS, pervasive developmental delay, and otherwise specified. As someone with that condition, with recently divorced parents, those 2 episodes both hit really close to home. Another episode that especially hits really close to home for me is The Good Birds Club. I think that's the episode I've rewatched the most. With, that's the episode that addresses bullying and peer pressure, because Big Bird wants to, like, join the Good Birds Club. And he gets an invitation to join, and he tells Gordon about it, and Elmo and Abby and Chris, one of the human characters in the show, like, he's gonna join the Good Birds Club. He goes to the Good Birds Club, and they immediately start making fun of him for his appearances. They're like, oh, you're not a good bird because your feet are too big. So he goes to Abby, and Abby makes his feet smaller. And then he goes back to him, and it's like, oh, no, look at the rest of you. Like, the rest of you is way too big to be a good bird. And then, like, he goes back to Abby. She begrudgingly, again, makes him smaller. And he goes back, he's like, no, like, your feathers are too yellow. Like, oh, good birds don't have yellow feathers. And he, like, and Abby initially refuses to turn him blue, but he coerces her wand to turn him blue. And, like, then that's when Elmo and Abby, Big Bird's real friends, report the harassment to Chris, the adult. They tell off the bullies, and they end the episode on a happy note by, like, starting the Happy to Be Me Club. Yeah, because, like, they remind him that, like, Big Bird doesn't need the Good Birds Club to tell him that he's a good bird. He already was one in the first place. You know, I watched that episode for the first time, like, sometime during my hiatus from making YouTube videos, you know, last, like, April and May. And I had a massive reality check because I see a therapist. I'm seeing him sometime next week. One thing I've been really, like, trying to work on is, like, anger management, because I've had a reality check within the past year and a half that I've, you know, left Fort Collins and been pursuing, like, you know, zoo internships and, like, dog places and stuff like that. The things I find myself feeling mad about the most. I'm never mad at anybody. I'm always mad at myself. And for, like, you know, in the way, like, I compare myself to others and I dwell on the past, I get so angry at myself, like, every day. Like, thinking about, like, you know, whether I'm at work or outside the house or in the house, I have these really, like, negative thoughts that, like, I am just not good enough. I compare myself to others way too much. I look at, you know, especially growing up, like, you know, here in New Jersey, like, going to elementary school, middle school, high school, I was really not happy with myself for not being like the other kids. Again, me having a disability and not fitting in with, you know, the normal kids or the smart kids or the cool kids, or, you know, and even during my college years, I still felt the same way. Like, I was surrounded by guys who were, like, way above me in terms of, like, social status. And, you know, like, and now that I'm done with school, it's like I've interned at zoos and I've, you know, worked at dog places, and it's like I tend to compare myself to people who already have a job, you know, in the career I've wanted basically my whole life. Like, I've had interviews. I had a job interview at a museum back in September, and I've had, like, interviews, like, at zoo, for zoo jobs since the year started. They all have chosen other candidates, and my brain has, like, it's been going back and forth. Like, I'm really not nice to myself. Like, I watched the Good Birds Club episode, and I've realized that I have been the worst, like, bully pigeon to my own Big Bird this whole time. Because I tell myself these things every day, that I'm too stupid, or I'm too mentally challenged, like, I'm too, like, you know, I tell myself I'm not good looking enough, like, I've been single for a while, so it's like, oh, I'm too nice to people, or that I'm too, like, I'm too stuck in my own head all the time. I tell myself all these really mean things, like, oh, that I'm pathetic, or that I'm a loser, or that I'm useless, or that, like, oh, my older sister is just, like, way cooler than me, and, like, I get so mad at myself, and I tell myself this every day. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna be alone forever and never, like, have a career and never, like, achieve anything. Like, I'll never make any big achievements, or never really, like, make anything of myself. I tell myself those things every day. Like, I say that to myself all the time, but I say that to other people, like, you know, coworkers, family, friends, roommates, like, zookeepers that have been, like, and other interns I've met during my zoo internships. Like, even just, like, people at the gym, like, people at bars I've been to. It's like, I tell myself these really, like, oh, that I'm not good enough. Like, I tell myself I'm not good enough for not going on more dates, for example, and I feel like I'm such a loser for it. And, like, I say that, and I sound way too much like the bully pigeon telling Big Bird this.
You're too yellow. What? Yeah, your feathers. They're too yellow. We can't include you in the club because good birds don't have yellow feathers.
Now that's just racist.
And I say that to people I've met in my life, people that I trust, and they say, like, oh no, Vitas, you're doing great. Like, they tell me that, like, hey, we love, like, you know, my coworkers at Dogtopia are like, hey, we've loved having you here. And, like, zookeepers and, you know, other staff and interns I've met during my zoo internships have been like, hey, you're a really smart guy, Vitas. Like, and, like, you know, my family, my friends are all, like, cheering for me, saying, like, hey, like, I've texted my former roommates from Fort Collins, like, a month ago, and they say, like, hey, what you're doing is so cool. It's like, those people in my life have been, they like, I say these negative things about myself to them, and they sound like Elmo telling Big Bird this.
Well, Elmo doesn't think Big Bird's feet are too big. Elmo thinks they're just right.
Like, you know, so Elmo, I know I'm late to this party. I know I'm late to, you know, making a video talking about your whole tweet back in February, which I know the platform's called X now. I honestly don't care. Like, I am not okay sometimes, but you know what? I'm insanely blessed and privileged to be where I'm at right now. and I'm gonna keep like. I know some days it's harder than others, but I'm gonna keep like pushing myself to just be better every day, both myself and others, and the dogs I've met, and like future zoo animals I get to work with. Anyways, I don't want this video to go on for super long. That's just like, I have quite a few plans this June. I'm just, man, it's crazy. This past Monday was Memorial Day, and, the summertime is upon us. This year, the rest of the year, it's going to be a good one. Like, I know it. So, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, like button, subscribe, please. And, yeah, stay beastly. Have a good night.